All right. Well, I don't even know what to call this. I guess we're kind of doing a complete overview of Phase 4 Balanced Druid, pre-raid gearing, consumes, rotation, you name it. We're going to talk about it here. I've got the homie Wonder joining me, I think for the first time. Well, you might have been on before for something. I talked to so many boomies, but we, we're good friends, I would say, from Discord, from Countdown to Classic, from the Druid disc, all that sort of stuff. So, Wonder, thank you for joining me today and sharing all this info.
Look, happy to be here, and yeah, I've definitely joined into your streams to have a chat every now and again. But I love all things Boomkin. Um, like thinking about the class sometimes can't help myself, and I love complaining about the class too. So it's one of those love to hate sort of relationships. Um,
Yeah, you're
but
good at that.
um, I guess where we are today has both positives and negatives, and I look forward to talking about that with you today.
All right, well, let's start it off with something I've been working for the past, how long has it been? A little over a week now. And it's the pre raid gearing. There's a couple of sets that are floating around online. I've got one here that I think you put on the Druid Discord.
Mhm.
Uh, and I've got a spreadsheet that I put together today with like the top three or four kind of options for each slot so that there's not just one piece and it's like this is what you have to get. Don't roll on anything else. Like there's some other options out there for this, but um, there's PvP gear like options. There's what profession options on here. There's sunken temple stuff. So uh, like what kind of gear, like what kind of stuff do you have to do? I guess in game in order to get this set that you have together.
Well, Balancer and gearing for previous is, to my mind, slightly different to most classes. Um, from what I've seen, most DPS classes completely remove their Sunken Temple tier set from their best list. And they either opt for a few off pieces here, some crafted pieces, um, and the 0.5 tier set. For us, though, we have a pretty big issue in that we need to hit 16% hit in order to do damage on bosses. And well, let's call it effective damage on bosses. So that you're not impacted by having your spells resist quite regularly. Um, and so that ends up becoming the focus of our gear, both at a pre-bis level and at a bis level. So when we're looking at what we've put together here for the pre-bis list, that means that we have to keep our Sunken Temple tier set simply because the chest piece has hit and the legs have hit, and then we get a hit on the two-piece set bonus. Um, so, there's a possibility, and, we'd be open here, that the boots could be replaced with something else. And that something else might be what is your future bis in your tier 0.5 boots. The problem is those boots, pound for pound, don't equal or don't match the set bonus from your tier set. So there's quite a bit of juggling that needs to take place as you go through the gearing process. You're not going to be able to just throw a piece of gear on and expect that you're going to do more DPS because of these interactions like set bonuses or the item that you're replacing not having hit. Or maybe it did have hit and the one you're wanting to put on doesn't have hit. So I guess that's our starting point for the previous list. And if we were to go, what dungeons are important for you to consider going into, it's pretty standard. It's the same for almost for everybody. We want to go into LBRS, UBRS, Strat, both undead and life side, and then you could do Scholar, although Scholar is probably not important to us. In the same way that Dimol East, West, and North, all we don't have any gear from, and we don't have any, let's say, bis gear or pre-bis gear that comes from the new dungeon as well. That's not to say you shouldn't consider going to those places, of course, with the new change of how you collect those reals or reals, then by all means go and enjoy those dungeons. Help out your guildies when they need to be farming a piece of gear as well. And collect those and use the tokens to buy your tier sets. I guess I've done a bit of an overview there, Go, but is that kind of what you were after?
Yeah, yeah. I was just looking at this set here. There's really not that many tier like the dungeon tier pieces. We've got what,
Yeah,
shoulders and bracers.
exactly. So it's just the two
So
pieces. But what I mean, I know you have potentially haven't got this ready with you, but what's interesting is that our BIS list also uses two pieces, but those two pieces are not those two individual slots. They end up being either the helm and gloves, and you can swap between the two of those, depending on which tier piece you get first in raid, and your boots. And so it's funny that, they're not your pre-BIS options. And as I mentioned before, the reason they're not your pre-BIS options is because we lose set bonuses from the tier set, from ST. So it's like a juggling act, kind of an awkward one, this phase.
yeah, that's really weird. uh I think the only reason I went to Sholo, I was trying to just get the like the dungeon set from like I think it's Helm from Sholo from the last boss.
Yep.
And then there was like one of the it might even be the bracers, the BOE bracers dropped from the trash from there, if I remember
Hmm.
right. So yeah, I did a little bit of Sholo, but yeah, I have not stepped foot in Dire Mall. I've not gone to BRD. Like there's I think a belt from the arena that could be useful that has hit on it. But other than that, like BRD is just it's not hitting for me. I've been in there too many times back in Classic.
Yeah, no, look, fair enough. And on that belt front, um, there are two other belt options. You could have the belt that came from ST, that's very good. You could have the Real belt, which again is very good. Or you could get the crafted belt, which is very good. In fact, that's your previous. Um, so there are plenty of options that exist out there, for that particular slot. And unfortunately for the wraps, you can probably go to the auction house and buy them for a gold piece now.
Oh yeah.
Um, so what's the point of doing Scholar?
uh, Dark Runes. No, I'm just kidding. But there's a couple other pieces that I'm not looking forward to the grind of because they come from the tier summon bosses, like in the
Oh, yeah,
dungeons.
yeah,
We've got the
yeah.
offhand. I see the ring, the rune band of wizardry as well. Um, is there a third piece from there?
So
I
it's
think
just the
there's a couple
offhand
other
and the ring.
options. Yeah.
But and the real painstaking point about those two items in particular is not just that they come from a summonable boss, but we have to have them. They are like vital pieces to the gearing because they both have hit. And the reality is we are so hit starved. Now you could take alternative pieces. For example, if you never get the ring or you never get the offhand, you could very easily run the AV offhand and change one of your trinkets to a trinket that has hit. For example, the Wild Offering trinket. What's it called? Breadth of Breath or something like
Yeah.
that. I can't recall.
Breath of the
Um,
Beast. Yep.
Breadth of the Beast. There you go. So you could quite easily swap one of those two pieces for that trinket, and that gives you a little bit more flexibility. Um, But it's awkward because our helm has to have hit, our neck piece has to have hit, one ring slot has to have hit, and our offhand has to have hit. So we kind of get pigeonholed or stuck until we start getting cast strike gear that has 2% hit on it. We're going to find gearing really, I want to say forced. I don't think we're going to have many options in what ends up becoming BIS throughout each of the phases.
Yeah, and while we're still talking at the start here of all this gear, you had said the cap is 16. We've got 10 from here. I don't know. You might have mentioned it already, but we get the other 6% from our ring runes. So we get
Correct.
the arcane specialization. We can throw on one ring for 6% arcane hit and then 6% nature on the other ring.
Yeah. And interesting, early on when we were leveling on my Druid, and I just picked up that nature hit ring. I was trying to cast Insect Swarm on a boss over and over and over again, and I had a huge resist rate. So I don't know if I just got really unlucky, or if there was some sort of problem with that hit. So I reported it to the devs, and they've either fixed it, or maybe it was just me having really bad RNG, because it wasn't something I experienced on the PTR. But whatever is the case now, seems to be okay. Well, we're not having those huge issues with resisting on any particular spell, I should say.
Yeah. One quick side tangent here is if they could just change that rune to give Druid specifically 8% hit for each of those, that might solve some of our gearing issues right there. Quick, easy change, yeah?
Yeah, well, I mean, even if they didn't do it on the runes, then they just put it on Moonkin form.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. I don't understand why there's a hesitation to do this. Like, we have a clear issue with our gearing. We have a clear issue with our talent tree. And scaling is a challenge. And look, I'm happy to complain about this because, the change where we get 2 spell power per level sounds great, particularly at this early stages. But as we go through each phase from MC onwards, that 120 spell power starts getting less and less impactful on a relative basis. And so I would have loved to have seen scaling attached to that component, whether it's 10% of your gear gives an extra extra 10% spell power, something like that, so that it's constantly improving. I feel like that would have been a lot better than what we've currently got. Or potentially, hear me out here. This is, I guess, picking up on one of your dot points that you wanted to pick up on before. But why not have Moonkin Form change the formula for the crit calculation with intellect? Make it 20 intellect equals 1% crit, not 60 intellect equals 1% crit. And that's the dynamic nature between, Boomy and Gear. I feel like that would be at least a little bit more interesting than what we currently have today.
Yeah, it did seem, briefly looking at like our best in slot items and stuff, that they were, and even from previous phase tier sets that they've come together for Boomy, that they're kind of leaning towards trying to give us crit on stuff instead of hit. And it's like, yeah, the crit would be nice, but we need hit first, guys. Come on.
Exactly. I mean, you know this. You could get a crit that does 25% of its normal value because
Oh, I hate it.
75% of it was resisted.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, I got a crit. Yes. Oh, no, wait, it only did a quarter of its normal damage. Oh, my God. That feels really shit.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of gear out there, but looking at this set, it's all leather, which is nice. So I'm trying to spin a positive here.
Yep.
Get away from the negative for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I find myself getting negative a lot too, but the Spellweaver's Turban, I already have it. Like I saw it drop one of my first couple runs in Ubers, so I got that situated. But other than that, yeah, everything here is leather.
And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That identification difference is good. Part of me, and you can tell me what you think of this, part of me, I don't like the fact that all of those pieces are really coming from tier sets predominantly. Part of me would like this optionality where there's an extremely good leather unique piece that both, say, elemental shamans and boomkins just desperately want. And there's, a little bit of fighting between that beyond just I'm fighting for a tier set token. Because otherwise I feel like the gear doesn't really, I don't think you build a connection to the gear at all. If it just comes to you because it comes, you've just got to wait an X period amount of time. Then I don't think it's that thrilling. So yeah, I mean, that would be a hope for mine in the future. And at the same time, it pisses me off that from prior phases, we've been having crafted gear as a part of the, our tier set or our abyss list. And then all of a sudden, our abyss list going into MC includes no profession gear. At least nothing that requires you to have
Yeah,
your profession.
yeah. Well, there's a cloth belt. I don't. Yeah, you'd have to be a tailor for that cloth belt though. I don't.
Mm.
I didn't remember the mats. Maybe the mats come from Molten Core though. So
Uh,
it couldn't be like a
ooh,
pre-raid.
the knowledge of the Timbermore one.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, it's definitely a very good um waste, but it's only what a couple of spell power worse than the leather one. So like, I'm kind of like, yeah. Um, and the leather one is BOE. So
Yeah,
again, you
yeah,
don't need the damn leatherworking profession.
yeah. What the cloth has 3 extra spell power and then a bunch of extra intellect,
Yeah, but
like
the
6
leather one
extra.
has more armor and stamina.
Yeah. And then it looks like that is. Oh, I guess you don't really need molten core gear from that, but yeah, it's the profession stuff in Phase 4 has seemed really strange.
Yeah, I don't want to say that it's wrong. I hesitate to say that, but suffice to say, I was kind of hoping for more.
Same, yeah.
Um, a little more from elemental and leatherworking in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now, I mean, if we transition it, elemental leatherworking has basically only been designed to craft fire res gear.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and that's the masterwork volcanic set. For which, I mean, any DPS, if you haven't started investigating your fire res gear, that set will give you 90 fire res alone. Um, and if you were to wear, say, on your neck piece, you get some resistance enchants. You should be hopefully pretty good to go for heat levels in Molten Core. Um, but that comes with a massive cost to us. Like, we're going to be running a ridiculous amount of hit under just to be able to go into Molten Core and hit and attempt to do damage. I feel like it's extremely punitive. So I'm annoyed by it because I
Yeah.
would have there should have been um fire res options in the elemental leatherworking section for casters that gave hit. And if it worked for melee too, great. But I feel like they get so many more options with their gearing. Like, they have leather options for hit, there are mail options for hit, there are plate options for hit, that they tend to not find it a challenge to get to a particular threshold or point. But for us, once we put on a few pieces of fire res gear, we're going to be struggling to hit bosses. And with the way our rotation works now of snapshotting dots, that's going to be particularly painful. Um, so yeah, for those that are running loot counselors out there,
Mm-hmm.
prio your tier pieces to classes that need high hit requirements like warlocks and boomies, um, and tell classes that don't need hit like shadow priests to, disappear for a while. Because we need all the help we can get from that gear to be able to be competitive in raid.
But
Not just because of our low damage base, but because we need the hit piece with fire res gear.
if a shadow priest gets hit, then they can talent out of it and then spend that talent point somewhere else. Come on.
Yeah, quite possibly. They'll be scaling superstars now.
Yeah.
Oh dear. But
So
it's crazy, man.
yeah. The leatherworking gloves were on there, and you had mentioned snapshotting dots. So
Hmm.
is that why the leatherworking gloves is the option for pre-raid?
Exactly. So, I mean, if your focus in raid is to do overall damage, then those gloves are incorrect. Um, they will not offer you the most DPS, during the entire course of a raid. And instead, you probably want to be wearing the tier gloves, 0.5 gloves instead, which, funnily enough, are your BIS. Um, so
Oh.
you can probably swap between those. And if you haven't got your tier 0.5 gloves yet, but you are rocking some gloves from Sunken Temple, if you're wearing the leather ones rather than the cloth ones, they're your second best option.
Hmm.
Um, But yeah, the Void Touch gloves are there simply for snapshotting purposes.
But do we know for sure that 10% that snapshots into the dots?
Well, things like PI'd still do. So once you've whatever buffs you have, trinket pops, etc., they all carry through. It would be a little odd if those Void Touch leather gloves randomly just stopped working mid dot. So
Yeah.
pretty confident. Yeah, that rolls over.
And I mean, even if you are a leather worker and you have these gloves already, you probably still should pick up one of the other gloves to use while that's on cooldown, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Now, look, for those leather workers out there that were like me, where you didn't pick up this and you went for was it the tailoring boots? I think they were in phase one.
Yeah, yeah.
Then in order to get these gloves, you have to go through BFD again. Pick up the box. Oh, sorry, get the item from Booty Bay, whichever approach you want to go through. And then you have to run all the way to Taran Mill and go up the hill again and talk to the shadowy figure up there. So you can't just go to the one that's in Moonglade and talk to her there and say, hey, give me the pattern. If you want to get it, you have to get the item and then go all the way up to what's the zone called? I can't even think of it.
I just know it's where the
Hillsbrad.
rogues go. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and talk to the figure there, and then you should be able to get the item. Or the pattern, I should say, so that you can make the item.
I still remember going up there, turning the quest in, and then I was reading something, and somebody, like an alliance, came up and killed me. And it was not
Oh,
fun to get all the way back up there from wherever
no.
the graveyard was.
I can imagine. A cruel punishment.
Yeah. All right, we've got trinkets. I've seen the Draconic infused emblem drop, and
Oh, wow.
speaking of snapshots, that's a big reason to get this. And then in the best in slot, we have Toep, which is the same concept.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually buffed more than what I'm seeing here on SoD. It says increases your spell damage by up to 100. I think it's 126, like in game. So
Ah.
it got a little bit of an extra tuning on it. So it's from
Mm-hmm.
the last boss of Ubers, which I've been doing my fair share of Ubers runs. A lot of
Yep.
rogues are trying to get their Fell Strikers, and they're, instead of just doing rend runs, they're doing full runs so that they can actually get a group and not be
Yep.
selfish and just do
Mm-hmm.
half the dungeon. And then we've got Briarwood Reed. I've only seen one of those drop, but I don't think that one's changed. It's still just 29 raw spell power. But
Yep.
are there any other options there, or are these two just kind of like you got to have these two?
Look, they're both very good trinkets. Have you killed the two world bosses recently?
I killed Kazakh today for the first
You
time. I
killed
have not.
Kazakh
I
today.
haven't gone to Azurgos.
Well, Azurgos, for example, is a fight where the dragon infused emblem would actually offer zero value
Hmm.
because you don't even get the opportunity to snapshot your dot. So there are going to be circumstances, at least that's what it looks like right now, where snapshotting, while in theory provides the most DPS, might not actually result in the biggest DPS potential output for that encounter. Now, we're probably not going to min-max Zergos, to be fair. So other options in terms of trinkets would be the one we mentioned before, the Wild Offering Trinket. And the reason that you would decide to wear that one instead would be because it gives you hit and crit, and then you would swap another piece for more spell power, and potential crit as well. So like, you would swap those summonable bosses, the offhand or the ring, and hope to get a little bit more spell power in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as an aside, though, the Decay Trinket, that was Biss last phase, is very good when you are starfalling a lot of targets because each starfall has the chance to proc, or consumes the stacks. So that ends up becoming very impactful to your damage. So that's another good option.
I can't remember the name of it, but I know we had it on the PTR, and it starts with like 96 spell power, then it reduces by 6 or 8 every time a spell is cast or something like that.
No, that one is the Sunken Temple
Yeah, yeah.
trinket.
Which
I'm
one are you talking
referring
about?
to the Darkmoon Fair card, Decay. So that one
Oh,
was
okay.
spells and attacks sometimes leech health from your target. I think it was 40 health. When the decay reaches 5 stacks, the target takes 225 to 375 damage.
I gotcha. Oh yeah, I think
And
I've
so,
seen logs with that. Yeah.
yeah, so because your Starfall is hitting every second, and then you're doing your casting on top of that, it just speeds up the rate at which you get to 5 stacks. It's part of the reason, or the same reason as to why this is a very good trinket for rogues, even still, just because of how fast they attack and how frequently can proc.
All right, we've got maybe we talk about weapons here next. I've tried to look for staffs, staves, whatever. There weren't
Hmm.
too many good options compared to just how much spell power and stuff you can get from having a main hand offhand. So like there are staff options, but main hand offhands are just so good. And like we have that hit from the offhand, and then the main hand is kind of a few options with that. So this one, is this the Mind Fang is from PvP?
Yes, that's the Arathi Basin rep weapon, and then the Horde version is or have I got this the wrong way? Sage Claw is the Alliance version of the same thing.
Oh yeah, like on 60 upgrades, it only shows me one. I think it shows me the wrong one.
There you go.
Uh,
But in terms of other options, there are some good alternatives out there, but nothing that really competes with this particular item because of the 1% crit that you get. So you could, for example, take the weapon from a Sunken Temple that became Biss, the Hubris, the Bandit Brander. You could also go for the new Thorium Dagger, that's revered, that reduces the threat that you generate, and gives you 33 spell power.
what's that one
The
called?
other one, sorry,
What's that one called? The one that reduces
Tempered Black Amnesty.
input. Ah, there it is.
The one that's surprising, is the Sunken Temple Mace. That was a main hand, the Madness of the Avatar. That is actually not a bad option. Um, and again, it's not a bad option because it has hit on
Hmm.
the gear. So if you have that instead of, say, the AB items, then you can potentially look at changing your offhand to the AV offhand. But collectively, that is less DPS than wearing the AB weapon.
And then, I mean, if you're 8 to 10 manning Azure Ghosts, then our phase Biss comes from there, and you can just pick that up without even going into Molten Core. So if you're considering Molten Core pre-raid and the world bosses aren't at raids, if you want to justify it that way somehow, then I guess you could say that the Fang of the Mystics is pre-raid.
Yep. Yeah, if that's your definition, then yeah, Fang of the Raid is pre-raid, but it's also Biss. Um,
Yeah.
so it'll be a great item to get if you can get it. Um, if you're in a guild and they're trying to figure out who it should go to, just start saying, "Hang on a second, mages actually want Key of the City as a weapon. We don't. We can't get Mage Blade. Mages and warlocks can. So hello, look over here, look at me, please pick me." Fang of the Mystics Pro on Boomkins. I think that sounds great.
I'm down for it. All right, we've got one other piece of or like slot of gear to talk about here. We got the idols. So
Hmm.
there's three choices here. We've got the one from Nomer, the Idol of Wrath, which
Yep.
is 2% base damage for your Wrath cast. They've got Idol of the Swarm for 15 of the reals from the dungeons, so it's pretty cheap, pretty easy to get. And then there's the third one, Idol of the Moon, which I've been trying to get my hands on to verify what I've heard in the Druid Discord, that it's only 7 extra percent base damage to Moonfire and only Moonfire, because the way this is the tooltip dilemma. The way the tooltip reads is, it increases Moonfire's damage and increases the damage of your Moonfire spell by up to 17%. And they're saying that 10% of that is just negated because of one of our talents, Improved Moonfire. So we were really only getting 7% base damage from that. But then Starfall, I feel like, should benefit from this, and Sunfire, I also feel like should benefit from this, and I don't think that it is. I think it's a buff. What do you think about the idols?
Well, if we focus on the Idol of Moon, my opening view is the same as yours. This trinket or this idol should be very strong. It should be. If it actually acted the way it reads, where it buffed your Moonfire by 17%. And if you followed the tooltips of all their other spells, everything that impacts Moonfire impacts both Sunfire and Starfall. By extension, this would be extremely good. But back in Old Classic, this only impacted base damage. Now, I can't recall if it only did the 7% gain and negated the talent. What I do remember is that it impacted base damage and it wasn't scaled by spell power. Which, again, if it did do that, it would be a significantly better idol. And so it's kind of disappointing if it is true or it is the case. And I'll trust the other people that have done the maths on it to say that
I don't
it's
trust them.
still only 7%. I also haven't tested it myself. Normally that's something that I would do. But in this case, I haven't got it yet, so I haven't been able to.
Yeah, I've seen it on the auction house, and I was kind of playing the long game, like hoping that it was just going to keep tanking in price once people figured out that, the insect swarm idol is better, so nobody's going to want to buy this. Just sell, sell, sell. And it got down to like 30 something gold, like 32, 36 gold. And I was like, oh yeah, now it's getting almost to that range where I'm about to buy it. And then the next day I logged on, like there was none. It went from like 8 of them posted to 0. And I've been looking all day for it and I can't find it. But I remember it the same way you do. Like I thought that it was 17% only base damage. I don't remember it only being 7%. Because I think I tested it a lot back then.
But part of me is thinking that people are looking at it after spell power and then saying, oh, well, it's only 7%. But the reality is it's 17 off base.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's probably just a minor thing, but the net result either way is that idol is not that impactful, and we thought it would be more impactful.
Is there any like fight scenario that you could think of where we would have this equipped over the insect swarm idol?
No. The one that you would choose to equip instead would be the Wrath idol, for 2% extra damage on your Wraths. So let's say, for example, a fight was, 10 seconds long. You wouldn't even equip Insect Swarm. And if it was 24 seconds long, then you would equip Insect Swarm because you get your full duration of your dot. But yeah, anything probably under, what would be the threshold point? Probably under 15-second kill time, 16-second kill time. Should be Idol of the Wrath, not Insect of the Swarm.
Yeah.
Which is a bit awkward.
Yeah.
And I really hope we don't see bosses like that in Molten Core. They're that simple and brain dead. Oh my god, I'll be shaking my head in disappointment.
Well, with how easy these world bosses have been, I know there's been a lot of feedback on that. If Molten Core, like 0 level, whatever it's called, like the normal version, is pretty easy, then we might see some pretty quick boss kills.
Look, my view is that world bosses are going to become just a 5-10 man event that you'll do with your mates. It won't be a
Yeah.
guild run event. It won't be anything special. You'll go in there. You'll target your pieces. Once you've got them as a collective, you just don't go back, and you'll treat it as a dungeon. That's basically my view on world bosses now, which means that there has to be staying power in Molten Core. I really hope that these heat levels um, from Molten Core are something that actually challenges or excites the player, because if we're sitting there and we're just having target dummy fights like Kazakh, then God, that's going to be very disappointing, particularly after this extended delay that we've had before this phase launching.
uh, fair enough. All right. I've got
One thing more on the idols is,
oops.
well, there is the option to do some idol swapping. Um,
Yeah.
so what you can do, like you would change your weapon mid combat, you can change your idols. So there is an opportunity for you, if you're looking to maximize your damage to the nth degree. You initially cast your insect swarm, and then the moment you start casting Wrath, you macro in a change, one or any other spells, whatever it is. You macro in a change to equip Idol of Wrath, so that while you're doing your filler spells before recasting your dots, you're ready. You're prepared to do maximum damage. You'll then just have to re-equip the Insect Swarm Idol before you cast Insect Swarm again 24 seconds later.
Yeah, I've been trying to think of, how to best idol swap, and you could even use the idol of the moon too. You start the fight off with the idol of the moon on, you hit your moon fire and swap to the insect swarm idol. Use insect swarm, swap to the wrath idol, and then I was just gonna use like Star Surge to get the insect swarm idol back on, like when I needed to reapply insect swarm. So I'm already trying to like think of what spells I need to make macros for and have extra keybinds for. I
Yeah,
haven't like there was no reason to idle swap back in classic. That didn't really come about until like TBC, and then
yeah.
we had kind of haste in TBC too, so it made it kind of clunky. It was kind of
hmm
easy to mess it up. I haven't gotten to feel how idle swapping feels in classic yet. Have you tried it out at all yet?
I haven't, and funnily enough, I also never tried it in TBC2. I would claim myself to be a professed sweaty when it comes to being a boomkin to try and get the most out of my class. But idle swapping in the past has had, because of that clunkiness, just a risk of doing less DPS than actually doing more.
Yeah.
Um, and I just erred on the side of saying I don't want to take that risk. Um, so if it's the case where that's still happening, with all of this swapping, I probably wouldn't swap between 3 different idols.
Yeah, yeah.
And even then, I would prefer to just do one swap for an encounter rather than swapping back and forth, mid fight. But the reality is, this is an option. It results in a very minor DPS gain, but it's a DPS gain. So, if that's what you're all about, by all means, go for it.
And speaking of minor DPS gains, I guess we can talk about melee weaving.
Oh yeah.
We've got Mind Fang here, which back in phase 1, maybe even phase 2, we had to have a weapon speed. I think it had to be under 1.5. Maybe 1.5 was the threshold.
1.5, yeah, is a
It was,
threshold.
yeah, but now we've got Mind Fang at 1.7. But
hmm
we can reduce that speed. And how do we reduce that?
So we would be required to get the War Chief's Blessing buff, or the Might of the Stormwind buff, which gives haste to melee attacks, and you would need the attack speed enchant on your gloves. With those two things combined, it brings your weapon speed under 1.5, and then allows you to add in or melee hits while you're instant casting. Now, the problem with this idea is we only have two GCDs, for when we are going to be doing a melee hit, and that is Star Surge every 6 seconds or Insect Swarm every 24 seconds outside of your opening button presses, where you've got Moonfire, Sunfire, Starfall all going at the same time. So that's what, one, two, three, essentially 5 GCDs, 6 GCDs that you have together where you get some melee hits in, but then it's very few after that for the rest of the encounter. Now, on fights where there's going to be multi-dotting opportunities, where we're just cycling between target and target and trying to maintain dots up on each of them, in that environment, melee weaving is actually going to be pretty impactful. You might actually get as much as 2-3% damage increases just from taking advantage of your weapon. But the reality is, on a normal encounter, singular target, you're talking a 1% damage gain. And again, this is one of those things. Are all Boomhins going to go for this? Probably not. Are people trying to get the 100 passes going to do it? Possibly. Can that be, ignored for the purposes of RNG on critting? Possibly. So again, options available for you to maximize your damage. Whether you choose to take it or not is up to you. I'm probably going to be melee weaving because it's free damage.
I'm thinking of like the last bot, Major Domo. There's a lot of potential there, I guess, because we'd probably be multi-dotting on that one. But I guess it's the second boss in Molten Core, the big dog. If you're in melee range, then you're gonna get feared. I think you can outrange the fear though. But then again,
you can.
Insect Swarm has a 30-yard range, so I don't know what the fear range is. So we might have to like Insect Swarm, like fear weave, like kind of take a step forward, Insect Swarm, come back, and just not melee weave on that fight.
Yeah.
But yeah. I tried to get into the melee weaving stuff in phase 1. I just can't stand being that close to the boss. Like I love being max range.
Yeah. I like to be able to see everything, and
Yeah.
Part of me would love it that Abyss was just a staff so that it wasn't an option, to be honest. But that hasn't really eventuated because even the Molten Core staves don't look, or staves, don't look that impactful or that impressive on a relative basis. So
Yeah.
Melee weaving is a feature of Molten Core if you would like it to be. And some fights are going to be better than others. So you've already cited Major Domo, but Sulfurin is also going to be pretty good for it. Who else do we have? Lucy has some ads as well that you can be meleeing on. Is Gehennas also has ads? My mind is being stretched. Yeah,
I'm really bad with the names of the bosses. I just know like order. I know like the first boss, the two bosses that you have to decurse for. Like
yeah.
2 of the first 3 bosses outside of the big core hound.
Yeah, so that's Lucy and Gehennas. Gar obviously has ads. Whether we're mailing them or not, I guess we'll have to see how the encounter works. But it's just one of those funny things, I really hope that it's not a feature moving forward, and if it is a feature, I hope that the devs lean into it as a feature, so that we get some sort of bonus to our spells from melee attacking, and that can be a new effect on a weapon, for example. I think one of the travesties of gearing for casters in, let's call it vanilla, or even here so far in SoD, is that our gear is very static. We only have a few pieces or a few stats that we really want to be focusing or targeting on. For example, spell power, crit, hit. Intellect, spirit doesn't really feature into, what makes a item better or worse. And we don't really get that many effects that, or modifications that take place on our spells like a melee does with their weapon attack. So I would love it, absolutely love it, if we got to see a little bit more uniqueness to the items that we get. so that we're not just looking at those same stats each time to determine what is better or what is worse.
Yeah, same. And I was thinking of how could they make staffs more enticing? What if here's another example of how they could just throw like a 2% spell hit chance, like enchant pattern into the game, but it's only for two-handed weapons, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, we got to make a choice here. Do we want a staff with 2% hit as an enchant, or do we want a main hand with 30 spell power? Maybe it'd have to be stronger than 2% hit.
Yeah, well, look, that is a perfect example because look at the spell power buff they just put on shields, and I'm
Oh
sitting here
yeah, I
going, well,
know.
what about offhands?
Yeah, yeah.
Offhands just sit there doing nothing. Why? Why? What the hell? So there's definitely possibilities for this sort of stuff. I mean, we haven't spoken about it, and not many people tend to talk about this, but consumables is also a big issue. The difference between having, say, greater firepower as an extra consumable, that's what 30, 40 spell power more than what a different class can get. We have a shadow version, but we have nothing for nature, and we have nothing for arcane. And so you kind of just automatically get put behind other classes because consumable doesn't exist for us. I'd like to see those things be added into the game, at least at some point.
Yeah, same here. And that was a great segue into what consumes do we actually have. I know we don't have as many as other classes, but like what do we need if we're showing up for raid to pump? I know we've got a flask, we've got an elixir, but what other kind of stuff do we need to bring?
Well, I guess if you're melee weaving, then you could go full tilt into that and grab, the agi pots, the strength pots, everything and anything, just to make sure that you're getting that little bit extra damage. That would be a little ridiculous to my mind, but look, it's an option for you. Um, another fantastic option would be Dragon's Breath Chili, which a lot of melee have been using for the last few
Dragon's
phases.
Breath chili.
But really, it is just spell power flask, the oils on your weapon, a greater elixir, a greater arcane elixir potion. And if you're enchanting, which is what we recommend as best, then the sigil will be the best option for you. Although it looks like there's going to be a new sigil introduced into the game that will buff the entire raid, which again annoyingly invalidates your profession
Yeah.
of picking enchanting. And I just do not understand what the hell we're supposed to do, because we were encouraged to go enchanting last phase with leatherworking, or you'd be encouraged to go alchemy with leatherworking. There's no leatherworking pieces as bis, so we're like, okay, the only thing we've got left to go that actually adds value is sorry, not engineering. It's enchanting and alchemy. But now enchanting offers no personal gain as well. I don't understand where we're going with this pathway. It's not like we're getting ring enchants or something to justify taking enchanting. And I just throw my hands up, going, "What the hell?"
I'm right there with you. I've been struggling because I was expecting elemental leatherworking. I've been looking forward to it since SoD was announced, and they were talking about like changing stuff and making professions like unique and stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, they're definitely gonna do something with that. And I've been playing the long game. I haven't dropped leatherworking
Yeah, me too.
on my EU tune, but now I switched to NA, so I have mining engineering. So like now I'm kind of stuck. Like I don't even want to change from mining engineering because I'm like nothing's really standing out to be like super impactful. I'll just keep my mining.
Yeah, but don't you feel that that's a little like, I don't want to say unfair, but it feels a little bullshit in the sense that other classes get significant benefits from their professions, and then we're sitting here going, "What? We only have one that's actually useful, alchemy." And that's not exactly been a raiding profession in the past. I I don't understand. Something has to be coming that we just don't know exists yet. that makes some other profession really good. And then we're all just going to have to adapt potentially really quickly to what that new thing is. At least that's my hope.
Yeah, same here. One thing that they did change, which was nice, which I didn't completely look up, but the Mark of Chaos from Warlocks. They have a debuff now, like a curse debuff, that reduces all magical resistances by 75 and increases all spell damage taken by 11%. Maybe that's only 10%, because why would it be 11? I wonder if that's just like a rounding thing.
No, it's because Warlocks used to talent into improved debuffs. So they used to give 11% benefit, not
okay.
10.
Yeah, like
So it's
that
just
was a
matching
great change because it was just arcane, shadow, and then fire, frost. There was no nature, so now we've got the nature included in the resistance and extra damage. That's huge.
This is one of those things that I think I've been asking for. That would just be a nice balance, but it's not like a huge buff. You know, in the sense that it's not game breaking, but it helps us be more competitive in PvE. The trade off is that this indirectly makes rogues a lot better than what they were because of the way they do damage now. And I think that that's okay. It's not a big deal. My only concern with this, though, is I don't know if warlocks like actively want to use this. So I was talking to a few people saying that they were telling me that fire warlocks are now the buff bots. They're not the damage dealers, so they take demo packs, which I'm really happy about. But I don't know how, or how we get this curse. If it's something that they actively want to do, or if there is a different alternative that they're incentivized to take instead. So my only caution is, in your own raid, make sure you're checking that exists and it's not being ignored. And if it is ignored, try and advocate someone put Curse of Shadow on the boss for you.
You got me worried now. I was just assuming that it was going to be like an automatic debuff that's going to get applied, but yeah, warlocks might fight against it or something.
Yeah, and I wish I knew warlocks more to be able to say, yeah, they're definitely going to take it or not. But I know what I'd be like if I was a DPS class. If I have an option between two runes, one's personal, one's raid, going to be hard to get me to do the raid one. And that's been the same for a lot of other classes. Warlocks in particular, right? Because they would use Incinerate instead of Demonic Pact for quite a while now. So I don't know. I wish it was as clear cut as just, oh yeah, it's going to happen. And I think this is just one of those clunky things that's happening as a result of the rune stylization of Season of Discovery. It kind of gives me hope that the learnings that they're taking from SoD is going to be is going to result in baseline changes to a Classic Plus game that does not have this sort of tension point, but fixes a few things that just have to be fixed. But we'll see. We'll see.
Hopefully. We've been hoping and praying for 2 years, so what's another 2 years of hoping?
Yeah, exactly. Well, 2 years only. I think we've been hoping and praying for 20 years almost now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's rough. It's been a rough journey as a Boonkin, that's for sure.
All right, let's talk about enchants.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple new ones that I don't really even know how to get, so maybe you can help me with that. But some of these I do know. I'm looking at the BIS list because it has the enchants that those aren't going to change from pre-raid to best in slot. So we've got Arcanum of Focus on the helm and legs. Those I know how to get those, but you want to talk about how to get those really quick?
They're the Librams from Dire Maul. So that's our one reason to go to Dire Maul, is to get a couple of enchants, and you hand them in the library at the end of Dire Maul West.
I always went through North to get there, but
or you could take the shortcut through North.
Yeah.
They're your enchants, and they offer what is it? It's like 8 spell power, healing power. I believe it is. To both your helm and legs, which is nice. I wouldn't stress about enchanting your pre-raid BIS gear. unless it ends up being a piece that's going to convert into the long run. Now, some people probably don't like that attitude. You eke out as much damage as possible. I kind of have this phobia or this real dislike of spending gold on a piece of on a piece of gear that's going to disappear in 2 weeks. But to each their own there.
Well, you say 2 weeks, and I see that these tier pieces we have to fight against other druids for one, and then what's the other two? Warrior and rogue? You think you're gonna get helm and legs in 2 weeks? Come on, man.
Okay, I take it. I take it back. I take it back.
Enchant your pre-grade gear, man.
Yeah, in this case, it's probably the case that you should be enchanting those slots. But how ridiculous! Apparently,
Yeah.
I think there was somewhere, one of the devs were talking about the fact that their class spread suggests that the makeup that they've selected is the right one, and I just look at that statement and go, does that include all of the friggin' hunter bots that are running around, farming and skinning and what have you if they're still in the game? Because I cannot understand when I look at a raid team and I see what the makeup is, it's going to be over 50% those three classes.
Yeah.
Or at 50%. And then you have two other tokens, and I don't know if your raid groups have been looking like mine, but one group is a caster group. And so that's got 5 people from one token. You might have a couple of healers, a priest, for example. So that makes it 6. So that token's already competitive enough. I don't think we should be on there. But my God, I really do not understand why warriors, rogues, druids are on the same token. That just boggles my mind. I really would have thought you'd put hunters instead of druids on that list. Or you'd put shamans and paladins on that list instead of druids.
Yeah, if we were just with like rogues, I think that might be fine. Or just with warriors. But having like both, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I would also be happy if they just had 2 tokens, like they do in ST. 3 feels a little rough. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of want to hold back because maybe things will change between now and then. It's not like we've seen these tokens. But my initial impression is, what the hell? It's not the first time they've done this. If I remember correctly, we had a really rough go in AQ. Was it AQ? There was some.
Oh, with the idols?
There was something that was like highly contested, and it was just really rough on our token.
Yeah, I think we needed to. Well, we didn't want the AQ, like the 2.5, tier 2.5 anyway, I don't think. But I think it was contested even if we did want it. Because, yeah, it was like the idols that came from the chests that you had to get the keys to open. And yeah,
it might have been.
Yeah, it's shared with a bunch of classes. It was weird.
Yeah, so I don't know. Like, I don't want to complain too much about it. The reality is we're going to get our gear. It's tier pieces. They come. You'll have them all by the end of the phase. If you're a loot goblin like myself and you just want to be able to do as much damage as quickly as possible, then this sort of shit pisses you off. But whatever.
All right, we've got the shoulder enchant, and this is the one that I'm not sure how to even get because I'm pretty sure it comes from Sunken Temple. The Atalai Signet of Mojo, which is
that comes
9 spell power?
from. That's probably a little cheeky. That enchant comes from what's the raid called? ZG.
Oh, why is that on here? I thought there was a different one.
No. That's the ZG enchant. So it's probably a little cheeky, but the reality is you can build ZG wrap up already. With the hand-ins from Sunken Temple.
Oh, okay.
Now I can't recall if you can just get the enchant or not. But some other people are claiming that they think it should be there, so it's gone on there. I am very skeptical that you'll actually be able to get it this phase.
I thought this was something that people have been doing all of phase 3.
No. No,
Okay. Well, did an enchant come out in phase 3? For like a shoulder or something?
no, I don't think there is any other enchant that's available, unless I'm just
Huh.
completely phasing. Oh, it does say phase 3. Hang on a second. Have I missed something this entire phase?
Uh,
Oh, don't do this to me, Go.
you've been missing
Sickness of
out
the
on
Lost
9
Temple.
spell
It
power, bro.
requires a flask. I've been missing out on 9 spell power. Unless I got it and I just forgot about it. Rewards from Sickness of the Lost Temple. Okay, I take it back.
I gotta look up logs to make sure that like top boomies have 9 spell power enchanted on their shoulders.
Oh, no, we clearly don't look at mine. Maybe this
I
is
said
why I
I
haven't been
said
getting
top logs.
hundreds.
Yeah. Oh no.
Oh shit. My God.
Oh yeah. This dude's got nine spell damage and healing. So
Well,
now I'm
I
left.
am embarrassed.
I'm left even more speechless now. I don't know how to get this enchant. I need to do the research on how to get it.
Okay, I already have it on my gear. I'm not hopeless. I
Oh,
just
okay,
totally
okay.
forgot. Must have been one of those things that you make a crafted piece of gear and you put it on straight away and then it's gone as a thought.
Yeah.
Um, so it requires a flask from Sunken Temple, the Flask of Nightmarish Mojo. You simply go to the Ojamba Isle, hand in the quest or hand in the item, you get the thing to put on your gear, and then off you go.
That sounds pretty simple because I think I was looking up on the auction house and they were only maybe 7 gold, 750.
Yeah,
So
should be pretty cheap.
I don't have to do the raid or anything like that. There's no attunement. I just buy that off the auction house, you think, and I go turn it in?
Yep, yeah, it would have to be the
Oh.
case. Otherwise, I would remember
Yeah.
it.
Nice. Yeah, that's easy to get for pre-raid then.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
So the next enchant that's probably really impactful for Molten Core is the greater resist, fire resist, or resist on your cloak. Now, this is pretty disappointing because there is a fire resist enchant that gives you 15 resistance that comes from the Cenarian circle, Cenarian hold.
Oh
I can't remember
yeah.
which one it is. Rep, but the vendor doesn't exist.
Yeah, that
I
was
literally
like
ran there
AQ or
yesterday to go
something.
check it out. Yeah,
Yeah, it came
so
out.
we're gonna have to be waiting for that one. So it's not necessarily available now. So this is the next best alternative.
I think I tended to go for the +7 instead of the 5 to all. I'm trying to think off the top of my head if there was any other magic damage in Molten Core. There's the maybe there's arcane. So having some extra arcane because you have 5 to all would make sense.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think because of what they're saying, in terms of versatility in the entire game, +5 is probably better. But yes, I
Hmm.
agree with you. If you're pushing heat keys, I would be putting the 7 fire resist enchant on. But for being, fair to what could go on around the world, um, we've
Yeah,
put
in
the
Blackrock
it's only
Mountain.
it's only 2 resistance difference, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not
Well,
game breaking.
the reagents too, like looking at the +5, that's a lot of stuff. 2 lesser eternal essence, heart of fire, core of earth, globe of water, breath of wind, ichor of undeath. That's a lot of things. The
Yeah.
lesser eternal essence probably costs a pretty penny. But for the +7, you need a lesser mystic essence lesser mystic essence and 1 elemental fire. So mats
Yeah.
wise, I'm leaning towards that +7 too. Like I might just get the
Yeah.
7.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I probably will be rocking that until I've got fire res gear from my tier pieces as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but that's okay. I agree.
And I did make a mistake with at least 2 of these enchants, saying that you can get them, or like there shouldn't be a difference between pre-raid and best in slot enchants because +4 to stats is from Molten Core, so
Yeah,
we
and
won't have access.
so is the spell powered weapon.
Yep. So what other
So we've
options for
got them
chest?
on there. We've got them on there because the reality is it's highly likely, but by the time that the ordinary person or the ordinary raider goes into Molten Core,
Yeah.
that those patterns have dropped and they're available.
They'll be available
You
an hour after Molten Core goes live. Yep. Those
quite
top
possibly,
guilds
yeah.
are going to be in there, and they're going to be like selling 30 spell power enchant, 50
Yeah,
gold
so
tip.
you know, for that reason alone, we've put it as pre-abyss. Whether that's fair or not, remains to be seen. But again, what are the alternatives? The alternative for the plus stats is 3 plus stats, so it's not that big a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And for the weapon, well, is it intellect?
I think there's
It's
22
basically
int.
it's basically intellect, which it
Yeah.
is not even a third. That's what 0.3% crit.
Yeah.
Like we're not talking something that is going to be really impactful to your damage. Um, so yeah, there you go. They are what they are. The only enchant that I don't think I have on the previous list that should be, or you could consider having there, is the attack speed on gloves.
Mm.
For that melee weaving capability.
Attack speed. I gotta find it. I think it's just called like haste, right? Minor haste. There it is.
Yeah, I think it's minor haste. Yep.
And then, like you were saying, there's intellect for bracers, 7 intellect. So we're at what, 29 if you have the main hand and that. So we're almost at
Yeah,
0.5% crit there from
almost.
and I guess if you add the 3 stats to chest, that's 3 intellect right there. Boom. We're
Yeah, so we get one half a crit from 3 enchants. So like,
hell yeah.
I, you compare that to what the melee option is, and they get attack power directly from their enchant. I just this is another one of those things that I expected to see changes on. I expected there to be more spell power enchants available from enchanting, but there just hasn't been. It
And
confuses me.
yeah, same here. I know. Like the enchants just make me sad. They've made me sad every phase. I'm like, are we gonna get something next phase? Are we gonna get something next phase? Like when is the cool enchants coming?
Yeah, it just feels like you're missing out on half the game, right? That other people are getting to enjoy.
Yeah, like the melee. All they have to do is get what agility, like rogues. I remember making a twink rogue, and there was agility for almost every slot, and it felt really
Yeah.
good to get all those
Yep.
enchants.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Because it
give.
feels like they feel impactful, right? Like you put it on, you
Yeah.
go, oh, I notice the difference.
Oh yeah.
And then for us, it's like, oh, it's not that huge.
And
Yeah.
speaking of things that aren't huge, the boots. I could have gone
Well,
somewhere
we
with
don't
that,
move in raid.
but
So, I mean, if you're a speed runner, minus speed is going to be useful. The reality is, it probably doesn't do much. The next best enchant is probably Spirit, which is just 5 Spirit. So
yeah,
if you happen to innovate yourself, that's a little bit of an advent, again. But don't ignore, say, greater stamina as an enchant here as well. If you're already taking a little bit extra damage, I think that would have been something that you could have looked at. And I'll hype on this as any chance I get, go. But my view is that Moonkins should scale off armor and get spell power from armor, rather than um that base 120 spell power.
yeah.
And it would have been awesome to actually use rugged leather kits or the thick armor, the armor kits from leatherworking,
Oh, true.
as our enchants for spell power. I don't know why we couldn't do something like that, but that just creates unique interactions to me that would have been interesting.
Yeah, I treat it like the crit for intellect. 60 armor equals 1 spell power.
Well, that would be fine too. Anything. I think my idea was 10% of your scaled armor, 5% even, is converted to spell power. So if you were to put, say, what's like the biggest, the thick armor? I mean, we haven't got core. Actually, we've got core armor kits, right? Their defense value, maybe not. Rugged armor kits add 40 armor. So if you have 360% on top of that, we're talking 120 armor. And if you're taking that 10% off that, well, at least you're getting one one spell power from the enchant, but it's better than what we had before.
Yeah, 1's better than 0.
Exactly. And it means that somebody's actually using those armor kits, because right now, who equips an armor kit as their best in slot?
I have gotten some of those turn-in things for that rep. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
it requires armor kits, so I mean, there's something out there for 'em.
It just seems like, to my mind, missed opportunities. Um, but hey, that's
uh,
okay. They don't
yeah,
have to have them all.
yeah,
One thing that
that's
we haven't
fine.
spoken about that I might want to circle back to very quickly,
Sure, yeah.
is when designing the best list, I've put together two different lists. One being 9% hit, and the other 10% hit. And the reason for that is, at this moment in time, we do not know if the Feral two-piece bonus, which gives 1% hit to all attacks, impacts physical attacks from melee only, or if it also impacts spells. Um, so we've presented both BIS lists, just in case it works. And if it doesn't, then, unfortunately, we have to use the 10% hit option.
Is switching
But yeah, just want to
from
point that out.
from 10 to 9, are you just switching that Breath of the Beast trinket to
Yep.
like read? Is that what it is?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's it. And that's why it can't disappear from your list, unfortunately. It's going to just be there as an option the whole time.
All right, let me see here. We've gone through a lot of stuff. Profession, gear, second tipple. I guess rotation.
Mm-hmm.
I can let me pull up the Druid disc. You have a little rotation there, but maybe we could just type one up on the spot and just
Yeah, definitely.
go from like pre-casting stuff. Like
Precasting?
yeah, what do we do if we can precast on a boss? Like what spell are we precasting? Is it Wrath? Is it Starfire?
Um,
Is it
well,
Hurricane? No.
okay, so the advice actually varies depending on what eclipse buffs you have. Okay, so if you are in a situation where you're clearing trash and running straight into a boss, and you're trying to determine what spell you should cast, on the trash that you killed before, your last GCD needs to be Star Surge. So that when you start pre-casting, you go Wrath into a Starfire. And the reason you do Wrath is because of the travel time. The time it takes for the Wrath to reach the boss is a little delayed, so that the Starfire basically lands just at or at about the same time as the Wrath. Right? But that's only if you have the improved Starfire buff active. If you don't, you can do the same process, Wrath into Starfire. It's just less punchy. And so instead, I would say you go Wrath as a precast into a Star Surge, pop all your trinkets. If you have anything that impacts or increases your spell power in a short period of time, that's where you want to pop it. You'll cast Starfall next, then you cast Moonfire, and then Sunfire, then Insect Swarm. Okay. Now the reason we do that order is Sunfire is more likely to fall off than Moonfire due to the way in which your rotation works. So, or the way your Loon's fires work, where it only adds 3 seconds. So if you delay it rather than cast it first, it just gives you that extra 1.5 seconds to make sure that it doesn't fall off. Okay. After you've cast Insect Swarm, you want to take advantage of the Starfire buff that you get from Star Surge, which was your first GCD. And then you go into your normal rotation, which would be Star Surge, Starfire, Wrath, Star Surge, repeat. Did I do that too quickly, or do you get all that down?
I got most of it. The only thing was that last whole section was if you don't have the Eclipse buffs, right? The only change was you Wrath into Starfire if you have the Starfire like buff active pre-pull. If not, you go through like Wrath, Star Surge on use, that whole thing, right?
Yeah, and it's because the fact that your Star Surge is going to land at the same time as what your Starfire would have, and potentially it would land before it, but it allows you to get into the rotation, your normal rotation faster, and therefore is more DPS. And it just varies, right? Like you need to Wrath so that your tanks have got time to get to the boss. And you need to then do something afterwards. If you decide to do a Starfire after your Wrath, it's not going to be that much of a DPS loss. It's going to be, almost equivalent. So there's a little bit of optionality there. But yeah, once you've started the encounter, your processes should be the same. Star Surge, Starfall, Moonfire, Starfire. Sorry, Sunfire. Too many fire spells.
I know, right?
Insect Swarm, Starfire, Star Surge, Starfire.
Well,
The names are too similar. I get confused.
I know. And then like the abbreviations too. It's like there's SF for Starfall, for Starfire. There's I think
And Sunfire.
Yeah, and Sunfire. It's like, oh gosh.
Can't abbreviate them. So
Where did I go?
it is what it is.
Well, what do you say to somebody that's looking at this rotation and they're like, well, why aren't we using Star Search on cooldown at the start? Is it really that impactful to get all those stuff out there? Like, at the same time, should you not Starfall after Sunfire and then Insect Swarm during the next, like, rotation?
So the reason we're not using Star Surge on cooldown is because we have not consumed the significant benefit from Star Surge, which is the cast on Starfire. And so you need to get your dots up as quickly as possible because they're going to last, for Moonfire and Sunfire's case, the entire duration of the encounter. Unless there are things in the encounter that mean that they're going to fall off. For example, Reflect on Azuragos, or maybe an RP during the middle of the fight where something happens and you can't do damage to the boss. Like, there are moments where your dots will fall off, but that's okay. You just deal with those as they come. Insect Swarm with the Idol is one of our best damage spells per GCD. And so for that reason, it gets a priority ahead of Starfire. Because it's not going to suffer from partial resists. So I guess this is a high level type sort of focus, but Starfire has the potential to do 25% damage. 0%, 25%, 50%, 75%, or 100% damage. And you can't ignore that. There's no Insect Swarm, on the other hand, is either going to miss completely or it's going to do its full amount of damage. And so because of that reason, we put Insect Swarm as priority. So after you've cast that, then you go into Starfire, consume the buff from Star Surge, and then, as I said before, you then go into your rotation of maintaining Star Surge on cooldown.
I was looking at a bunch of spells today, and speaking about Insect Swarm, they call it a binary spell. So it can either fully resist or like fully hit, I guess.
Yep.
And there's two other spells. I'm gonna quiz you and see if you know which other two spells in our toolkit here are also binary.
Oh shit.
One's a trick question, and I sent the info to the dev, the WoW Sims dev, and let them know because in the Sims, these other two, like what did I say?
Well, one is Star Surge.
Yeah, so
Star Surge doesn't suffer from partial resists.
Star Surge is correctly acting that way in the sim. Insect Swarm was not. Insect Swarm was showing partial resist, so that should get changed. I talked to Innate about it, and he said it shouldn't really impact the DPS. So I'm curious, like, what it actually will look like on the sim, if there will be a noticeable difference there. But yeah, there's one more. There's one more, and it's kind of a trick question.
Shit. Is it like the Starfall Splash or something? I don't know. What is it?
It's the reverse. So Starfall Splash can partial, but the Starfall Stars do not.
Oh, well, there you go. That's a bit odd.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at the World Boss logs today, and I was like scrolling over like to see how much spells are partially resisting, and I've multiple logs, multiple like starfall usage, and none of the star ticks, I think they're called, were partial at all. But all of the not all, but the splash had some partial.
Hmm. That's a unique interaction, isn't it? Like you
Yeah,
would not
yeah.
expect.
Like what's going on there?
Yeah. But look, I think it's good. As a general idea, like it's a general thing, I think the idea of partial resists is horrible.
Yeah.
Um, it's already painful enough that we have 1% permanent mischance, and then to add in partials on top of that is just rough.
Oh,
Um,
the
in a world where we're struggling to balance casters against melee, this is a simple thing to get rid of, just across the board.
I was hoping that they were gonna get rid of the 1% chance to miss. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy that it's still in there. Does it feel vanilla? Yes, but I think we've moved on from that. Like that was a phase 1, maybe phase 2 thing where they was trying
Yeah,
to keep that friction. This friction needs to go away.
I think so. It's not a fun friction, right?
No, no, absolutely not.
It's just like a disappointing friction.
All right, so we've got the single target rotation.
Mhm.
What about multi-target? Does it change for 2 targets and then it changes again if there's more than 2 targets, or is it kind of like if 2 and more targets, it kind of would stay the same?
I think we really need to give a shout out to Nate here because the work he's done on this is top notch. So you can use the information that we've put on the Druid Discord to change the settings and the rotation style that you could use on an encounter based on what Nate has found to be optimal. Okay, so uh, if you want to maximize your DPS and there are 2 targets, the way to do that is to maintain your Moonfire on 2 targets. Then you want to make sure that you main Insect Swarm on 2 targets. And then you want to maintain Sunfire on 2 targets. All right, so the reason that we do Moonfire first is because it is easier for us to maintain Moonfire because every time you cast Star Surge on those mobs, you're going to be able to get a 6-second increase on the Moonfire duration. So you can cast Star Surge on one, tab to the other target, and cast Starfire on that mob, and both durations have been increased, hopefully to maximum. Okay. When you're doing filler spells, you'll cast Insect Swarm on either one, each 24 seconds. And then you'll try, and I stress try here, to do a Wrath. You're probably going to go Wrath cast on one, tab to the other, Wrath cast on the other, and constantly juggle that sort of tab movement between the 2 fights to maintain all 3 dots. And if you're able to do that, that will maximize your DPS. And to really stress the importance of this, if you have, say, Toep, anything that modifies your spell damage on those dots, that's where you're starting to see some significant gains. So we go from 2.7k or 2,750 DPS for single target to 3,300 on 2 target DPS fights because of the power of the snapshot, as well as the doubling of the damage that comes from Starfall. So those two things in combination make us pretty good cleave DPS on some encounters. Now the reality is there is no 2 target fights in Molten Core. So we said, okay, well, what do we need to do to make sure that we can do this on more than 2 targets? So we do have more DPS gains to be made on 4 targets, which is where you maintain Moonfire and Sunfire on 2 mobs, but then you so like you did on your 2 target, but you keep Insect Swarm on all 4 mobs. Okay, that would be the most optimal. At 5 targets, this is where it starts becoming very difficult to my mind. If you have to maintain dots on 2 targets, Insect Swarm on 5 targets, that's a bit hard. You might tab incorrectly, you might not get it correct. Whatever could happen might impact your DPS. So at 5 targets and onwards, my advice is for your raid to bunch them up and for you to hurricane on cooldown. Now, Innate's view is a little different. Innate's view is that you can still do the multi-dotting, and you should only do the hurricane and the starfall, so the chain hurricane casts, if you have 6 mobs or more. Yeah, I worry about that. I just think, in terms of like a skill cap suggestion to most people, that might be a bridge too far. But the DPS difference is about 100 between those two different approaches at 5 targets, so it's pretty close. And the benefit for Hurricane is its base damage, right? Like it's not gonna change its output. You're gonna do what you're gonna do. Whereas the multi-dotting approach, something could go wrong, and then all of a sudden your DPS tanks.
Yeah, one dot resists, and then it's like, oh, where was I at on target number 3? I don't remember.
Exactly. And so while it's possible, I think it's going to be rough.
Yeah, and then I was trying to think too about Hurricane, like as far as misses go, and partials. I don't remember if Hurricane can partial either. Maybe Hurricane's
Hurricane
binary.
doesn't partial.
Yeah, so I don't know. Hurricane might have some value there. I'm
But
kind
it
of
also
on board
doesn't
with
crit.
you. Yeah, true. But it does apply the debuff too, so we're helping our tanks and our healers.
Yeah.
Applying that debuff to the targets.
So look, that it's definitely going to be the most dynamic a Moonkin has ever been in raid. We have multi-dotting capabilities on multi-target. We have an interesting single target rotation. So gameplay wise, I think Moonkin is in a fantastic spot. I cannot give props to the SoD team, anymore. I think they've done a fantastic job with the design, rotation, gameplay of Moonkin.
Oh,
But
okay.
I think they've shit the bed with the damage relative, the damage component.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say, like, what about the teased 8-set bonus that we got and then that vanished? That would have been insane to play around with. You remember the Starfall like increasing by 10% damage or something?
Yeah. Look, I mean, my view is that we're probably going to see tier sets that drastically alter the way you play the game each phase. So right now, our tier set is based on clump everything up. We want a Starfall as much as possible. That's basically our tier set, right? There's nothing else to it. That might come into effect later on. I wouldn't say that it's going to disappear. I think they may have seen the community's reaction to that tier set bonus and gone, maybe we can do something else with this later on. That might be dynamic. So could come back, go. Who knows?
Yeah. They did change some tier sets and they put it on rings or something like that. I forget what class and that they were talking about, but they were like, yeah, we thought it made more sense for this tier set bonus to be placed on a piece of gear and outside of the tier set. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, maybe there's hope. The hopium is strong with us, Moonkin.
Yeah. So I mean, the problem. I don't know if you want to go. We did say this was going to be Druid everything phase 4. And that there is a single problem with Druid, or balanced Druid in particular, and that is we do not offer anything unique to a raid. The utility that a balanced Druid provides is done better by a Feral Druid because they bring Wild Strikes, and they also bring 3% crit. It's just a melee. And the 3% crit they bring to melee does more DPS than the 3% crit we bring to casters. In terms of, innovate, battle res, Feral Druid brings that. We don't. So there's no special reason that a raid should be bringing a Boomkin. And I'm sorry to kind of, take this view or hold this line for all of my fellow Boomkins out there. But if you can give me a clear argument that says a Moonkin has to be in every single raid or should be in every single raid, I would love to hear it. Because right now, there's nothing. Nothing that says that we should be or could be in the raid, unlike every other class. Actually, maybe Elemental Shaman is kind of in a similar position. But at least they're fantastic damage tanks. Like, holy crap, have you seen their damage in dungeons?
Oh yeah,
It's
what is it?
insane.
Lava burst or whatever it's flames shock. I don't know what it's called, but yeah, one of their
Yeah,
abilities is just doing crazy damage.
I can't even out DPS an Elemental Shaman tank as a DPS.
I know, I felt
Like,
bad.
holy crap. And so at least they have a purpose or a function that they can offer the raid. I just do not understand what we are doing as Moonkins. Like, we've come into SoD with this hope, this guide, that everything is going to be so much better. We're going to come to raid. We're going to be welcome. We're going to feel like we're useful. We're going to be competitive, but we're going to be the worst single target damage in the raid, if you're in the raid. And I'm talking about this, when you compare class to class, right? So some people are going to do 70 passes, some people are going to do 90 passes, and I get that that's going to make your overall raid damage look a little bit different. But if everyone's performing to their maximum, a Boomkin should be your bottom DPS. And there was this whole discussion, this whole argument that's taken place on Twitter, on Reddit, and across the forums on Discord that said utility is going to have a slight negating benefit to your DPS. I can get around that viewpoint, but give us something that we offer the raid that's unique, that says we demand a raid spot. Because right now, it's pretty sad. Because again, we're at a position where the DPS loss from taking a Boomkin instead of another mage does not equate to the benefit that we give up Hardy. And it's frustrating. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, I just took our phase for BIS, simmed it, and then I resimmed it without having Moonkin Aura for us.
Yeah.
And it was a 37 DPS decrease. And then I multiplied that by 4, and we're at about 150 DPS. So yeah, as long as another caster could bring more than 150 DPS than us, then yeah, our raid spot's kind of
Exactly. And they all do, right? Like mages are simming, mages are doing, what did I say? I said, 2.2k mage pre-bis on Kazakh, and I did 1.6k.
Oh
like,
yeah.
we're already so far behind, and we do not offer anything in trade-off. And I don't know how much we need to kick and scream to make this change, like kick into gear for people. But it is ridiculous. It is actually ridiculous.
Wait, is this a horde only issue? Because Shaman brings what's it called? Storm Strike.
Yes,
And
they do.
But Alliance doesn't have Storm Strike, so
But then they only have one other class that uses nature damage in the rogue. So the one buff that we do potentially bring buffs one faction only, and that faction already gets the buff that they need.
I see. Okay.
So it means that our rune on our feet, Dream State, and I'm sure every Boomkin or every Druid that's listening to this video knows what Dream State is, but for those that don't, it is basically just an MP5 rune that works for us open world or in dungeons, where it gives a 20% nature debuff to the target. If that was arcane damage and nature damage, it starts being a little bit better. And this is something that we've asked for, but for whatever reason, doesn't seem to be getting added or changed. And it's not like Arcane Mage is suddenly going to turn online with a 20% damage buff. I don't understand why we're suffering or, falling back in such a way. Give us something. Give us something, please.
I hear you loud and clear, man. I want to have at least a reason to say, hey, we need at least one Boomkin in the raid. Like, just bring me. Don't bring any other ones. Let me get all the leather spellcaster gear, and that's fine. I don't want to have to roll off against anybody. But yeah,
I mean, see, okay, this is where I'm a little different. I would love a raid to be like, we're taking 2 boomkins. Shit, yeah, let's do it. You know, we're
Yeah.
getting benefit from each of them. Like, why can't moonkin aura stack with each other? Why does it have to be separate? Or only one buff to the
Well,
party.
even if
It's
it
not
did
even that
stack.
big a buff.
Yeah, even if it did stack, the same argument would apply. It's like, well, now we need 300 extra DPS to replace both Moonkin, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, it's not even like you're getting that much for the punishment. Yeah. So you could up Moonkin Aura to 5% crit, right? You could up it. It would probably need to go to something like 10% crit to actually start being impactful enough to say, actually, a Moonkin should start coming to a raid instead of a caster as a buff bot.
Yep.
But until we get something like that, it's just like you're just not doing that much.
Yeah, we need some sort of Earth and Moon debuff that debuffs spell power or something, even if
Well,
it's
okay, so
arcane in nature. Like that's not gonna stack or like be the same as that warlock debuff. It needs to be its separate own balanced druid only like spellcaster debuff.
well, the one you're talking about is essentially delivered by rogues now. It's called occult poison. Have you heard of that one?
I've seen it on the sim. I didn't
Mm.
read through the entire tooltip there, but
So I think Zyrene, one of the QA guys at Blizzard, have said that that is how they're going to buff casters by adjusting the benefit that occult poison gives to the raid. So
so
if casters,
rogues are mandatory because they have this, but yeah, the
but
casters that they're
but
buffing aren't going to be mandatory.
but not only that, that one buff is now the best utility in the game because it's 10% non-physical damage, and the rogue does fucking the most DPS in the raid. So this whole like argument that people keep talking about is utility, should suffer some sort of penalty, is a load of nonsense
Oh
because
yeah,
the classes that bring some of the best utility do the most damage. And what I define as utility is increasing damage to the raid.
yeah, that's fair.
Not, in the event that one idiot dies because they can't do it in a mechanic, we get to bring them back to life. Bring them back alive. To me, that's not utility. That's, a failsafe. And a failsafe having a 1000 DPS punishment on a relative basis to other classes, or even 2000 DPS difference between those classes is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. If it was 5%, 10%, maybe I could get around that, but such a large gap, uh, we're getting back to the same sort of potential positions that we were at in Classic, where a Boomkin did 40% of the DPS of other classes, and were just not invited to raid. You probably felt like you could contribute and do a good job in the raid, but then you'd look at the DPS meter and go, hang on a second, this guy over here is doing 3 times my damage. I was having fun doing what I was doing, but what the hell is this bloke? He must be on cloud 9. They get more optionality with weapons, more optionality with gear. They get more weapon effects on their stuff. They get better enchants. Do I sound like I'm hating on melee, or do I sound like
Oh
I'm hating on
no,
melee?
no. I think it sounds like you're gonna re-roll melee. No.
um, yeah, I just it's frustrating, dude. It really is. And I love the game. So like I said at the start, I'm a Moonkin main that loves to hate on Moonkins. Um, because it feels like so much just goes against us within um the confines of the game.
Let me stir you up a little bit more on that the utility argument with like B-res.
Mm.
Let's talk about one of these world bosses that we have right now. One of the 2 world bosses that we can fight. What happens if somebody dies on that fight?
Oh,
Do you B-res them, or does it heal the boss and you kind of be like, all right, well, it's time to wipe. So like our one of our utility on that boss fight is just negated. Like,
yeah, yeah, but it just doesn't make sense, right? Like Boomkin needed to use Innovate as a personal button for mana, so it wasn't a utility buff for the raid, and yet people would always say and position and say, innovate as a raid cooldown, but it's not. Like, so these propositions that people have been saying for Boomkin for quite a while, it has just fundamentally been wrong. And these perceptions have been built up over a long period of time, where you might be in an average raid or an average group, and sure, innovate might need to go on a healer every now and again. But the reality is, a Boomkin should be consuming it themselves, and if they're not, they're playing wrong.
Yeah,
So
I had to use it on a shaman, I think it was, on Kazakh today. Because like we were all on Discord, it was a pug raid, like an LFG like raid, and the raid leader did a good job telling everybody, don't go out of mana, don't go out of mana. If anybody got to like 30%, he was calling you out like by your name on Discord, like, hey, you're low on mana, watch out. And this Pally's mana just kept going lower and lower, and it got to like maybe 5%, if not lower than that. And I used my Innervate on this guy because they weren't properly watching their mana so that we wouldn't wipe. And I was like, yeah, that felt bad that I had to use, my Innervate. I was fine on mana, to be fair, but, I had to use one of my GCDs to prevent us from wiping because this guy didn't care about his mana.
We have idiot protection. That is literally what a Moonkin is.
We have carry protection, yeah.
Like, I don't mind playing a support in a raid, but when we have tools that don't support the raid to excel. We have support that stops them from being stupid, which is not fun. If they wanted me to be a little bit more excited by having these buttons, I would like a personal benefit to pressing them. So if
Absolutely.
I cast Innovate on somebody else, I get a buff of X, and that is a DPS bonus buff. If I cast B-Res, I get a huge damage buff, because not only am I helping somebody else come back to back alive at relatively a significant cost to myself, I then get the thrill or the enjoyment of actually resing them. And I think that would be a much better place for the utility to be positioned. It's not to remove it, but it's to reinforce it so that we don't feel like we're punished for going out of our way to do something better for the raid. In the same way that Shadow Priest gets to do healing just by DPSing. That at least feels good. Our buttons don't feel good to press.
One thing with utility buttons giving us a buff when we use them, like I'm fully on board with that. Like I've been wanting that for a while. One example that I think that they could pull from for ideas is the Titan Rune dungeons in Wrath. So they had the mirror images, I think, in alpha, and then you just had to kill the mirror images or they would wipe the group. And then I think it was in beta, like Titan Rune beta, they changed it to where if you killed the mirror images, you got like a haste buff. So it didn't feel as nearly as bad to take your damage away from the main target and moonfire and add, kill it, like one shot it, but then now all of a sudden you have haste because you did that. Like I liked that sort of stuff in the Titan Rune dungeons. So if we had something like that, like if we decurse a mob or we decurse a player and then we get 5% extra damage for 10 seconds or something, like any little thing like that, like would go a long way in making those utility buttons go from feeling completely terrible to being like, oh, okay, yeah, this isn't that bad. I got decurses this week. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, look, I kind of feel a little bit differently about decurses than I do Innovate and B-Res. I think that's okay for us not to get like a DPS gaining sort of effect from.
Wait, we were rolling there for a second. Don't go off tangent here. No.
Well, because at the same time, then I would expect I would expect mages to get the same thing. I would expect anybody that has the potential to dispel an effect to also get something similar. And so I don't necessarily feel that way. I think that becomes a unique part of an encounter, and it's a way to get through the encounter, right? That is slightly different to saying, if I'm doing something to get somebody back in the game or to save a raid, that I get benefit from it. And I think that's where the benefiting or DPS gain from be it battle res or innovate, would be good. And it might not. It doesn't have to be huge, but it
Yeah,
has to be
no.
something.
Yeah,
You know.
anything.
Um, on the haste idea that you were just raising, uh, Blizzard were going to give Boomkins haste in phase one. I don't know if you remember. But one of the crafted pieces that they designed had haste on it initially. Actually, no, it wasn't phase one. It was the shoulder piece. For Sunken Temple. Or was it Noma? Can't remember.
Yeah, one of those
Whichever
previous three
phase it
raids.
was. Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
tired.
I
Um,
remember. Yeah, yeah.
but it had haste on it, and we had to provide advice saying, even though you were giving us the haste, because Star Surge was so impactful to our rotation, it actually would do nothing. That is
Yeah.
completely different to right now. Right? So if we had haste today, and it meant that we got more ticks on our dots,
Ooh.
that actually starts having impacts, significant impacts on our damage. And we would actually be able to get more filler casts out and be able to maintain those dots even better. So all of a sudden, haste, which didn't have value before, holds a shitload of value now if we can get it in the game. So
Well,
that's one of those potentials,
it was in the game, mainly for like mages. They had that trinket in BWL that was
Yeah,
like 30% haste or something ridiculous that every
yeah, and
mage
only
went
for them.
after. Yeah, and I think
Yeah,
that was probably the only caster haste in
yeah,
classic.
mind quickening gem.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I remember they had to nerf that in TBC, I think, because people were going into
Hmm.
arena with it or something. It was that good.
Yeah. So it's definitely something that could be on the cards. And if we're watching our class carefully and we're trying to advocate or talk to the devs, and I'll be honest, I I feel comfortable enough to reach out to the devs and feel like they are hearing what it is that we're talking about or asking for. Some of the things that we ask for might be a little ridiculous. Okay, and
No, no.
um, I think it's important that you have an ambit claim. You put something out there that is just a little far fetched, and maybe just maybe they'll go, shit, yeah, that's a cool idea. Let's fucking do it. Um, and if they do that, awesome. Let's run with it. And one of those ideas, for example, is wild strikes impacting spells, just like it impacts melee hits. Um, it doesn't have to do full damage. It could do 25% damage, but that would just be cool, right? And if casters are struggling, why not? Let's make wild strikes impact spells, and that will mean that every boomkin gets a spot in the raid because every caster is going to look at that and go, "Holy shit, gimme, gimme, gimme!" In the same way that all melee go, "Holy shit, gimme, gimme, gimme!" to win Fury.
And they've got
Um,
Hand of Justice too, which like gives them an extra attack, right? And then they added a
yeah,
new version of Hand of Justice for hunters. So casters are the only ones
but
that can't like get a double proc of their cast. Like
But isn't this the same thing that I was saying before? Melee get all of the sweet, cools, and little toys
yeah.
um, that impact the way they play the game. The way a caster plays the game is basically the same. The only variation that we get on our trinkets is base spell power, base crit, base hit, or for X period of time, you will do more spell damage.
Yeah.
That's it. Can't we get something else, please? Anyway,
All right, well, let's
what
talk
can I say?
about best in slot gear here.
Okay.
You said that there's not that much of a choice, like that there's really only like I guess one option for a lot of these slots of gear here.
Yeah. And we get pigeonholed into them for a few reasons. So, um, you have to take 6-piece because tier set because of the set bonus, reducing your starfall by half. That 6-piece bonus is just so impactful. Um, I don't really know what else to say, but that leaves us with like a certain amount of hit that we have to achieve.
Well,
So we'll have
let's stop there for a second if we can.
okay,
I'm just thinking about like what's going to happen in phase two. That's going to be the
all right,
first set bonus that goes away when we start getting, say, our 2-piece in tier two. Or
yeah.
yeah,
I made this exact comment to Agron saying Starfall feels really balanced. I think that it's actually, as an AoE spell, in a really good position. The problem is it's balanced around the 50% time on the tier set. It's not balanced
Yeah,
around,
yeah.
say, active use. And so we're going to go from feeling really great about pressing Starfall to like not being able to press it on half of the packs, potentially even more than half of the packs in a raid. And that, I don't know, doesn't feel that great to me. In fact, it feels unfun. Um, so I'm worried. I'm actively worried that we're going to have a trash raiding set, and then we're going to have a boss set that changes each, as we go through a raid, just so that we can have freaking Starfall up 50% of the time.
Yeah, maybe they're cooking on something and they'll somehow put that 6 set bonus onto a ring or something from BWL. Like once we get the ring, like that won't stack. Like it won't stack with the 6 piece 50% reduction with whatever X item has that has the
It
same
might it
thing.
might become an idol.
Yeah, yeah, or even an idol. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like right now we have this feature of insect swarm as a part of our rotation, which is not something that we really thought that was going to be a thing. And I mean, if you remember correctly, insect swarm was on the tier set bonus.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, what the hell is that? We don't want that. So my guess slash hope is that Starfall will become an idle bonus, and then we'll just accept it as normal and move on from there. But that annoys me. I would rather it be baseline correct now and give us something new on the 6 piece that is unique or special.
Ooh.
But hey,
Yeah,
what can you do?
they could give us like a book in phase 2 or something. They could give us a quest or something. Like we downed Nefarian at the end of the raid, and then if we got class called one time or something during the encounter, then the boss will drop a book and we can train the
Yeah,
book and we'll have our 50% off Starfall. Something. I don't know. But yeah.
yeah. But you're with me, right? It just feels a little
Yeah.
rough, and it's going to feel a bit bad losing that shortened time on Starfall in future raids.
Yeah. Now I'm thinking about the questions that we could ask the devs through the homie countdown,
Mm.
the homie Josh. Like, uh, it's probably too far out ahead, but like they've got to be thinking of tier stat bonuses for phase 2. Like what?
Oh, I'm sure they have tier set bonuses for every phase already kind of mapped out.
Yeah, it's like
Um,
give me a
but then it'll
hint.
be tweaking as we go.
Yeah, give me a hint at what those stat bonuses are gonna look like. Yeah,
Yeah.
they'll probably change, anyways. But
Well, like I
I
said
want to know.
before, like I'm very confident that we're going to have what they're calling transformational tier set bonuses.
Hmm.
So you will drastically change the way you play as a result of your tier set bonus, which I am all for. I think that's
Yeah.
really good. I think that's going to be better for some classes than others. Right. So right now, boomkins really only have one way to play: dot and hardcast. And we don't have optionality in our runes. It's going to mean that we can just suddenly change that approach. It's our only approach. Um, so I don't know how they're going to transform the way a boomkin plays. I think they could quite easily change the way a rogue plays, for example. They can buff Saber Slash, and then they can buff Mutilate, they can buff whatever the friggin' other spells that they're using, all the runes that they're using at a given time, so that they, chop and change. But for us, it's going to be the same thing every time. Um, Maybe the order that you press buttons is a little bit different because of some focus or something like that. But yeah, I'm skeptical. I'm really skeptical.
Yeah, same here. All right.
But if we lean back into the gear, so we've
Yeah.
got 6 piece tier that gets locked in, right? Um, Now that means that there are we look at which 6 pieces do we select out of the 8 that should be Abyss gear. Well, I've stressed before, but we expect that we need to hit that hit threshold target. Thank you. So first start with all of the hit pieces of tier. We'll get those out of the way. If we can knock those out of the park, and that means that we get which are the hit pieces? Let's go through them. So the first one is shoulders. We have to take tier shoulders. We have to take tier. Is it pants? Not pants.
I see bracers.
Oh my god. Braces have hit?
It might just be
Okay.
those two.
Shoulders and braces are musts, right? We then have options on which piece do we want to take, because the rest of them all have crit on them. But the 4 piece gives 3% hit. So, okay, well, we need to figure out which ones they're going to be. So all that you would do is you'd look at the 0.5 tier set bonus, sorry, the 0.5 item, and the tier 1 item, and go, which is more powerful in this slot? And for most of them, that means that you end up leaning into the tier 1 being better. But then in some slots, either the 0.5 has hit, but the tier piece does not, or the 0.5 piece gives exactly the same amount of stats as the tier piece. And that is what eventually dictates what has made up our BIS list, right? So that has resulted in the following setup. Tier 1 on shoulders, chest, wrist, belt, pants as 5 tier pieces. You then get to choose whether you want to have tier 1 on your helm or your gloves. And the reason it doesn't matter which one you pick is because both cases have hit and both do about the same amount of spell power. There's 1 spell power difference between the 2 combinations. So it's basically identical. The 1 slot that you will not change, that you have to run, is your tier boots, your tier 0.5 boots. They are a requirement because they have hit on them, and the tier piece does not have hit. Okay, so that eventually makes up most of the stats. After that point, we go, well, we have neck slots, we have back pieces, rings, and trinkets. And again, it's all about making sure we hit the hit requirements. There is no good hit cloak. So the cloak ends up being the most spell power we can get, which is Drape of the Firelord. There is 1 hit ring. This is, in my opinion, the most important item to your gear in Band of Sulfuras, because it has 1% hit and a truckload of spell power. If you were to prio 1 piece of gear, this is the piece that I would be focusing on.
Not the trinket?
Not the trinket.
Oh.
I think the trinket's the second most important item to target.
Okay, there we go.
Just because of how painful hit is going to be for you. Now, every other caster that needs hit is also, well, just, still needs a little bit of hit, is still going to want this damn ring. And so if you see this go to an arcane mage and you're pulling your hair out, you do not want this sort of stuff to be taking place. So this should be your number 1 item in terms of your gearing. And then Toep. And the reason Toep holds such significant value is because of that snapshotting element, particularly over, when there's multi-target fights, that just holds a lot of value. So that rounds out the BIS list pretty much. The rest is just maximum spell power you can get in the slot.
Yeah, the Fang of the Mystics. Is that the only one that's outside of Molten Core? Right? Because Drape of the Firelord. Is that from Onyxia?
No, that's going to be a rag kill, because Firelord is Major Domo, right? Major Domo is a Firelord, or is Rag the Firelord? I can't remember. But that'll drop off rag.
Oh, okay.
Oh, the Cape of Major Domo moves from Domo to rag. That's what I'm thinking of. But yeah, Drape of Firelord drops off rag.
Then we have the offhand still from that summonable dungeon tier boss.
And again, that's just a hit requirement. So we when putting this BIS list together, it really wasn't that difficult. It's not like I had many options to consider. It was just a play around with the rings, trinkets, and offhands to see what combination ended up giving the most DPS. And this is what we've got.
I'm trying to tally up how much fire resist we have here. 42.
This is a good question.
Like just on this. 9.
So
It looks like 59 just on the gear. And then if you
yeah.
tally in the enchant, the greater resistant enchant.
So fire res is going to be interesting. So the one thing that we should all be doing is changing our neck piece for a fire res option. And the reason we pick our neck piece is because it does not provide hit. So basically, any piece that doesn't give hit, doesn't give hit, is something that you should consider okay to swap for fire res gear, particularly if you're going to be pushing heat 3 early on in Molten Core. My guild holds the view that it's going to be doable from week 1. It's just going to be a slog. My hope is that it's locked behind something and that it's not available week 1, because if it's available week 1, it means that everyone's going to be geared way too fast. And the phase is going to feel dead very quickly. But I'd like it to be the case that tier 1 is a bit difficult. Once you've completed tier 1, you can do tier 2. Once you've completed tier 2, you can do tier 3. But we'll see. We'll see if that's the way it's set up. So, what sort of items should you be targeting for fire res? Well, the cloak enchant is one. You can get just like a straight fire res cloak if you'd like, and then put a fire res enchant on there as well. So that should give you a decent amount of fire res. The next one, as I said before, will be your neck. You could use, say, the Oni neck if you needed to.
Is that the melee one though? Like it's got agility, stam, fire resist.
It's got agility, stam, and all that sort of jazz on it.
Yeah.
If you can
Okay.
get a caster neck piece with fire res, which to be honest, right now I don't even think exists. I haven't gone and investigated it, to be fair. I kind of got a bit caught up on the fact that we're not going to have what we need to be effective in fire res gear. So we're just going to be crap. We're already the worst DPS, and we're going to be even worse putting this fire res stuff on to be able to make it through the potential requirements for Heat 3 and Molten Core. So if you can find, say, fire res ring, you're going to drop one of your rings. You'll drop your neck and you'll drop your cape. Then it becomes a challenge. I would drop whatever you have your 0.5 tier set bonus if it doesn't have hit. So your gloves or your helm, potentially other slots to replace with a fire res piece. But again, this is not going to be a fun, enjoyable process. You're going to hate it because you're going to lose so much spell power as a result of wearing this gear. It's going to feel really bad.
Yeah.
I think prioritizing hit is important, but we may have to suggest running under hit cap. I don't want to put anything out there, like publicly of this is the best list right now until I've seen, or, other people have seen what Heat 3 looks like, to provide a recommendation on, the best way forward. That's why I started earlier saying, if you can try and encourage getting 6-piece tier really quickly, I think it's extremely important that you do within your guild, because hit is a challenge and fire res is a huge hurdle for us.
I remember having to swap fire resist gear for fire maul in BWL and how bad that felt. And the lack of spell power was a big turnoff. There was a few like flare core pieces that were really nice to have, like the crafted cloth pieces. It looks like they might have added another couple of like epic crafted fire resist pieces that might still
they're
have
all
spell
melee
power.
based.
Yeah. Oh dang.
So this is where it's awkward, right? I'm pretty sure that if one of the recommendations is going to be that we wear Agi boots,
Oh
but the only
gosh.
reason we have them is because they've got a truckload of fire res and they've got hit on them. In the, is it the Corehounds leather boots? I think that's what they're called, or something like that.
Corehound boots, it looks like, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's actually going to be an important piece for us.
24 fire resist.
Because it'll just enable us to do some damage. It's just frustrating that there's not a single spell power hit option for fire res. And I put out a call to say, was this even thought about? And the response was basically tough titties. Like if you're expecting to be hit capped with fire res gear, that's not going to happen. So I think we just got to accept it.
We don't have to just accept it. No, don't have that mentality. We fight. we make a
This is what happens
petition.
when you've been defeated for so long, right? You just go,
Yeah.
ah. Like it's not going to be a problem for Shadow Priests. I think Shadow Priests in Molten Core are going to be the most important class to bring to a raid because of the fact that they can just put any piece of gear on. They'll have their hit requirements. They'll be able to do the same amount of DPS that they were doing pretty much before, and they'll be able to heal a raid. Oh, sorry, their party. With VE. So yeah, Shadow Priest stocks are through the roof for Molten Core. In as you go up heat difficulties, at least that's my early crow call.
And now it's back to your argument of, does Boomy have a raid spot? Probably not. And then even more so in the fire levels of Molten
Yeah.
Core. So
Yeah, and it's just a really difficult position to be in, right? And I don't understand why it feels like it's always us that ends up in this sort of position. It's not like you'll ever hear a warrior. I mean, okay, arms warriors aren't exactly knocking on the door saying, "Hey, what's going on with us?" Because they're still doing reasonable damage. Reasonable question mark. But they're not getting taken to raid. It's a bit funny.
Oh yeah, yeah. All right.
Just quickly while we're talking about fires, though, I mean, I think it's important to recognize that there are thresholds that you might want to consider reaching.
He's got yeah.
And to ask the question, when is too much fire as too impactful on us? If you're level 60, if you want to mitigate 20% of the damage that you get from all fire damage that you take, you will need to have roughly 90%, 90 fire res. This is after you're buffed. Okay. If you want to mitigate 40, just think of this as a linear line. That means that you need to have roughly 180 fire res. And if you want to go as crazy as you can and wear like complete fire res gear, which I will never recommend as an option,
no.
then you would go to like 75% mitigation on fire res damage taken. And that requires something like 300 to 90 sort of fire res values. My personal view is we should be okay if we can get to about 180. Maybe 170 is probably enough. And this is, of course, an early call without seeing the Molten Core heat levels. But I really feel strongly that any more basically means we shouldn't turn up. Because your damage is going to drastically change for every piece of hit gear that you lose. I don't know if you're very familiar with EV values go, but your hit value changes in terms of how much DPS you gain or lose, depending on how much hit you already have. So if I'm going from 9% to 10%, that difference might only be worth, like 10 DPS, 20 DPS. So if I have a spell power option that's, that provides that, in theory, I could run under hit cap and do more DPS, right? But going from 9% to 3% hit because I've lost 6% hit, that could be like a 40% reduction in damage, which is huge. Like,
Oh yeah.
I don't care if you're resisting, 30, 40% of the damage you take. I would say you're better off not taking me and bringing a healer so that everybody else can wear less fire res gear in that circumstance. And this is where part of the challenge just really comes from. But I don't. Yeah, you can break the game down mathematically if you like. It kind of takes a bit of the fun out of the game. But the reality is, a lot of people are going to be focusing on optimization, and an optimized raid in a fire res capacity does not have a boomkin. It has a lot of mages and it has a lot of shadow priests.
So yeah, Blizzard, help us, please. Give us something. All right. I think we've covered everything I had on our little note list there. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about for Boomy in Phase 4?
Oh look, I don't like finishing on a negative note like we've just kind of done. So I'll reinforce the positives of a boomkin today.
There we go.
If you compare boomkin DPS from any phase 1 in vanilla to today, we are doing roughly 280, 270% more DPS than we were doing originally. That is a significant improvement. The game style, the play style is significantly better. It's probably one of the more interesting rotations that are available to a player in SoD. And I think the Eclipse version that we have today is the best version of Eclipse that I've ever played. So I give massive shout out and props to the devs for that. I think they need to be congratulated on a job well done for the thematic styling of the Boomkin. All that we're asking for is to make up that last little bit, which makes us a bit more competitive compared to everybody else. Because the reality is where we are today is where other classes were in normal vanilla. So we've just caught up to it, but what I would call baseline. We're now looking to get all of the gains that everybody else has gotten from SoD. We need something to kind of bridge that gap again. And if we can get something like that in terms of consistent changes or balance updates, then I would be very, very happy. Whether that comes in the form of a new cooldown, whether that comes in adaptation of the 120 spell power that we get in Moonkin form, or something like that, a new spell or something going baseline like Gale runes pissing off and becoming baseline and getting a new caster rune slot in the helm. I think that would just be good design, good progression for a Boomkin moving forward. And even if all of that stuff doesn't happen, I will still be playing. I'll still be enjoying the class itself, and I'll still be bitching and moaning the whole time.
Same here. Like I've been playing way more SoD than I have Kata since this phase launched. And myself, like many others that I've heard, it's like, why do you like why is SoD fun for you right now? It's like I can't put my finger on it. I can't explain it, like why this version of Moonkin feels really good to play, but it does. Like the rotation is kind of neat. There's not too much flavor outside of like getting the rotation down. Like once you get it down, you can kind of close your eyes, have a weak aura that says your spell resisted, and then just hit that keybind again. But yeah, dude, it feels so fun. I've been doing loads of PvP, which that's a whole nother discussion on its own, just PvP. But yeah, it's been fun.
Well, I think if you compare to Kata Boomy, while probably does the most competitive DPS that it's done in a long time, is the worst gameplay of a Boomy that's existed. So
yeah.
Well, I get not wanting to play. I'm not playing Kata because I just can't stand it. Yeah. So I get it. I get it.
All right. So I guess we can wrap it up. Wander, thanks for joining me. I don't even know how long it's been. It's probably been about 2 hours or so without looking.
Oh my gosh, really? Holy smokes.
I don't know. Let me see what we're at here. Yeah, 2 hours 15 minutes. So
Yeah, I've said many times I could talk on Boomy subject for hours, so We've proven it just now, and that's only on one phase. Oh my god.
Oh, I know. I can people find you anywhere? I don't think you stream or anything like that, but I know you're pretty active on the Balance Druid Discord.
Yeah, look, I don't stream. Sometimes I'll stream a raid, just for my guildies or people on my server if they want to see, our guild go and attempt to kill the stuff. But the reality is I'm not a good talker in a raid. I'm deadpan. I'll be focusing on the content, not talking to you. So not an entertaining streamer at all. So if you want to find me, you can find me on the Druid Discord. Pretty active there. I have a read of it most days. And if I can provide advice to you, I will. I'm not one of those people that will just scream check the pins. I'll actually answer your question. So yeah, I'm happy to be helpful, and if you'd like to ask me anything, hit me up there. Just do an @wonder and I'll pop up.
Perfect. Are you gonna stream your first raid in Molten Core by chance?
I'm gonna be doing it with the alt group because
Oh,
MC launches at 6 a.m. on a Friday for us, and that is my big work day. So I cannot join the prog rating team. So I won't be streaming it. I'm sure somebody else will. And when I get in there, everything will already be known, and it won't be as exciting as
oh.
what it would be for prog. So normally I would be, in amongst it and pushing, but not this time.
All right, man. Well, thanks for all the info. We figured out that shoulder enchant. I gotta go and log on and get that. So yeah, bro. Thank you.
All good, my man. Anytime.